If you're looking to improve your coding skills and build a project that will help you manage your finances, then you've come to the right place. Ciao guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Lore, I'm a data analyst working at Amazon, and in this video I will be walking you through a step-by-step Python project that will not only help you get your finances in order, but also help you to build your data analytics and data science portfolio. I personally think that this project is great, as we will be using a nice set of resources like the popular pandas and NumPy libraries for data manipulation and analysis, as well as the Google APIs to fetch data, and Panel for creating interactive and beautiful dashboards. By the end of this video, you will have a functional and aesthetically pleasing money management tool that you can use to take control of your finances and impress potential employers or clients with your data analysis and dashboarding skills. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I will make sure to leave all the resources that you need to properly follow along in the video description down below. And the first thing that we're going to do is to open whatever platform you prefer to run your Python code. In my case, I will be using Jupyter Notebook just because it's easier to run different blocks of code and show you the output. And here, the first things that we need to do is to import all the packages and modules that are required for this project. So the first modules that are required for manipulating the data is pandas and NumPy that we will be importing here. Then we will be importing gspread, which is the package that we need to use the Google Drive API. And then we're also going to be importing some modules that are necessary to build the interactive dashboard. And so go ahead and import all of this. And obviously, if any of these modules are not already installed in your laptop, then you will need to install them beforehand, for example, using pip install. And so I've done that already. So I'm going to run this first piece of code. And this is just importing all the packages. Okay, and so next step is to connect to our bank data and clean up our transactions. So here, most of banks will give you the option to download your statements or transaction, either from the website or the mobile app. So for example, myself, I'm using Revolut. So I went to the Revolut app and I downloaded my bank statement. So just do the same using your app or website from your bank. And so just to show you, my bank statement looks like this. So I saved this in my Google Drive. This is the name of the file, Revolut, and it has basically this information here that we are going to be using for this project. And so the first option to connect to our bank statement is to use the Google Drive API, which is the first option that we're going to do now. And then I've included other options that you can use in case you don't want to use Google Drive. Okay, and so in order to use the Google Drive API, we're just going to follow the gspread documentation. So I will leave that in the video description as well. And so the first thing is to open the Google Developers Console. So I'm going to do this now. And then from this page, I'm going to go here and then create a new project. And I'm going to call this one, let's say, Python project. I don't need the organization, so I'm just going to click on create. And then in here, in the top bar, I will need to enable the API. So I will click on, we search for Google Drive API, this one here, the first one. And then I will click on enable. And then I will do exactly the same for the Google Sheets API. So I'm going to search this one and then click on here in the marketplace, and then enable the Google Sheets API as well. Okay, and then under API and services here on the left, I will click on credentials, and then I will click on create credentials, service account, and then we will need to fill out this form. So service account name, again, choose whatever you prefer. I will do again Python project. The service account ID will be populated automatically. I will click on create and continue. And then these are optional steps. So I'm just going to click on done. All right, so this is our service account. And so I will click on manage service account. Then I will click on these three dots here. I will click on manage keys. I will click then on add key, create new key. I will leave JSON, and then I will click on create. And this should download a file on your machine that is a JSON file that you can see here in the screen. So I'm going to close this one. And now I will go back to our Jupyter Notebook. And basically, I will just follow again the steps from the gspread guide on how to connect to your Google Drives. And so basically what I'm doing here is very important here. I've added this in the note, is to move the JSON file in the same project directory, project folder that you're using for your Python file. So wherever you have stored that file. and then rename that JSON file to service account.json. So this is a very important step. And so after that, I will just define GC as the gspread service account with this JSON file name. So exactly what we done just now. And then I will create sh to basically get the data from the file that is called Revolut in my case. And then I will run this block of code here. And then the next step is to, I'm gonna create WS to basically access the sheet 1, which is the name of the sheet in my Google Sheets file. And then I will create a data frame that is basically getting all the records from sheet 1. And then just to show you the output, just to make sure that the data is coming through correctly, these are the first 5 rows in the data frame. Now, as I said, if you don't like Google Drive, maybe you don't use it, then there is a different way that you can use to connect to your Excel or CSV file. Maybe if you store that locally, then you can use option 2 to directly create a data frame that is getting whatever is the name of your file, your CSV file that you stored locally in your machine. Otherwise, if again, maybe you haven't managed to get the bank transaction data from your bank, then you can actually run option 3, which is basically a way that I created to recreate the data frame, the data set that we're going to use in this project. So you can run this column that is populating all the rows, and also create these column names here. And then also you can store everything in this data frame down here. And now that we connected to our data, what we need is to clean a bit the data frame. So we have to make sure that we come up to the same format, because that is what we're gonna work on for this project. And so in my case, I've just selected from the data frame the columns that I'm interested in. So completed date, description, and amount. I also want to lowercase all the fields within description columns. So this is what I'm doing from this line here. And then I will also rename the column completed date into just date. And then the last thing is to add a column that is called category. And within this column for now, we're just gonna input the value unassigned. And so this is how the data set that we're gonna work with is gonna look like. And so you can just adjust this piece of code to come up to the same output that we are gonna use going forward. Okay, and so the next step is to actually assign each transaction to the right category. Now, this is a very tricky one because maybe your bank statement would already have the category for each transaction. In my case, Revolut completely remove that column whenever I export my statements. And also, other ways to do that is to pay for a third-party app for your money management, which is something that I definitely don't want to do. So we're going to kind of recreate that using Python. And so the first thing to do is to define all the categories that we're going to use as buckets for all our transactions. And so in this case, the categories that I define, and obviously you should choose whatever works better for you. I chose self-care, fines, loresowhat, some expenses connected to my channel, coffee, groceries, shoppings, and so on. So yeah, just go ahead and define your categories. And then in the next piece of code, we're gonna assign each transaction to the correct category automatically in Python. Okay, and so this is a bit of a manual process, but this is something that you just have to do once. And then whenever you run your code, it will automatically assign each transaction to the correct category that you have defined. And so in my case, for example, what I'm doing here is basically using NumPy and saying, okay, when the description column, whenever you see, for example, Uber or Zipcar or Bird or TfL, in my case, I'm based in London, so this is what I'm using as transport, then assign the value transport in the category column. And in the same way, for example, for travel, I put Ryanair, EasyJet or Airways. So whatever it's appearing in the description, if it has these strings here, it will assign the travel category. And this is basically something that you have to do for all the categories that you have defined. And now the next step, again, to clean up a bit our data frame, is to convert the date column to a date-time format. So this is what I'm doing here. And then I also want to extract the month and the year information from the date column. So I'm going to extract the month and the year. And then this is the data frame that we have with the date, the description of the transaction, the amount, the category that is now correctly assigned, the month and the year. And now something that I want to check which of the transaction has not been assigned to any category, just to make sure that we don't have any wrong information. So in this case, I have this Amazon EU, but it has a 0 amount under the unassigned category. So I'm actually fine with that. I'm not gonna touch that. Okay, and so now we need to understand what we want to do with this data frame. And so the way that I'm thinking about it is to create an interactive dashboard that I'm gonna use pretty much on a monthly basis. So the way I'm gonna do it, and obviously you can adjust it in whatever way you prefer. I'm gonna put a title at the top of the dashboard. Then I'm gonna have a sidebar with some text, images, and also a filter to make the dashboard interactive. Then I'm gonna have a top banner with a kind of a summary of what happened in the last month, and we're gonna do this together. Then I will have a bar chart that will give me information about each category and the expenses for the last month. And then I'm gonna have kind of a summary view of all the months, so all the history of my transactions, and also a summary table where again I can check in a kind of a detailed view all of my transactions and data that I'm using. Okay, so let's start by the first element of the dashboard. That is this top banner, where basically I want to see a summary of the last month income, the recurring expenses, which is something that I'm actually tracking in a different way. So I'm gonna input this manually. And then the non-recurring expenses, which is basically the transaction that I've downloaded from my bank. And also I want to have an idea of the savings for the last month. And so in order to do that, first of all, I'm gonna get the latest month and year from the data frame. So I'm gonna just use max for the month and year. And then I'm gonna filter the data frame to include only transaction from the latest month. And so this is what I'm doing here. I'm gonna run this piece of code. And then again, I'm gonna do a bit of cleanup. So I'm gonna call this data frame last month expenses. So I'm just gonna group by category and getting the sum of the amount. And then I'm also gonna exclude the category that is called excluded. There are some transactions that I wanted to exclude from my bank statement. So that's why I have a category called excluded. And also I will exclude all the transactions that are unassigned to a specific category. And so I'm gonna show you what the last month expenses data frame looks like. So this is it. And then now I'm actually gonna create a variable that is called last month expenses tot, which is just the total of this amount here that you can see in the data frame that we just created. Okay, so now what we are gonna do is defining these 4 widgets that we're gonna put at the top of our dashboards. And so the income widget is a widget that is basically gonna be called income, and we're gonna set the value to 0. Then we have the recurring expense widget, which we're going to call recurring expenses, and again we're going to set the value at 0. Then we have the monthly expenses widget. So this is actually taking the last month expenses total, so the one that we calculated in the block of code before. So this is the total amount of expenses for the last month. And then we're going to have the difference widget. So this is actually the last month's savings, which is again we're going to set the value at 0. And then the next step is to define this simple function that we're going to call calculate difference. And this one is taking the income from the income widget, recurring expenses, monthly expenses. It's going to calculate the difference. So the difference is going to be income minus recurring expenses minus monthly expenses. And then it's going to retrieve the difference widget value. And then the next lines of code here is basically adding event listeners to the input widgets using the param watch method. And so this means that whenever the value of any of these input widget changes, the calculate difference function that we defined just now will be called with an event object as its argument. And so the event object contains information about the change that triggered the function. And then the last piece is to put all our widget and elements in a row using PN, so panel. And also I'm going to add these at the end, so the show, so that we can see the final output for this first element of our dashboard. So I'm going to run this code here, and this is the output. So as you can see here, I can do, let's do an example. So income, I'm going to put 3,000. Then for recurring expenses, let's say that I have 1,000. So I'm going to input this one manually. And then the non-recurring expenses, we see that is taken from our dataset. And this is the last month savings that the function automatically calculates. Okay, so now the second element that we want to include in our dashboard is a simple bar chart that will show the expenses of the last month by category. And so in order to do that, we use the last month expenses that we had before in here. And based on that, we're gonna use hvplot to plot a bar chart using the x-axis as a category, the y-axis as amount, and we're gonna also adjust the height and width of the chart and also insert the title last month expenses. And then we're gonna run this piece of code here, and this is the simple result using hvplot. And then the next step is to create a similar bar chart, but this time we want to create a monthly expenses trend. So we don't want to see only the last month data, but basically data for all the months. And so again, we're gonna just clean up the data frame a bit. So we are gonna restart from the initial data frame that we had. And so again, a bit of cleaning here. So I'm just gonna convert the date column to datetime object. I'm gonna extract the month and year. I'm gonna this time group by month and year and then category for this data frame. And this is what we're gonna call monthly expenses trend by category. And then I'm actually gonna rename the amount value into amount, and I will add a space at the end. This is a trick that I found in order to have the axis, which is basically independent from the same axis that we created here. Otherwise, basically the scale of the two axes will be the same, which is might cause some issues in the visualization. And then in here, I will run this block of code. And this is basically the data frame that we created for the bar chart. Okay, now we're gonna define the what is called panel widget. And it's basically a filter that we're gonna use in our dashboard to make the dashboard a bit more interactive. And so I'm gonna define this as select category. The name of the widget is gonna be select category. And these are the options, which are all the categories that we have. I'm not gonna add excluded, I'm not interested in that, but I'm gonna add also the all category just to select all data. And if I run this one, this is the widget, how it looks like. And now in the next block, we are basically going to define a function. This is plot expenses category. And basically this function, whenever category is equal to all, the function aggregates monthly expenses across all categories using the group by and returns a plot. And then otherwise the function filters the monthly expenses trend by category data frame by the specified category using lock. And then basically aggregates monthly expenses. And then we're gonna generate the plot using hvplot function from the HoloViews library. And then also we are gonna define the callback function that is named update plot category that depends on the value of the select category widget that we defined before. So whenever the value of select category changes, also the update plot function is triggered, and it calls the plot expensive category function with the updated category that is selected. And so if I run this piece of code here, this is the final result. In this case, we just have data of January and February. And then if I select a category, then the chart updates accordingly. All right, and then the last element that we want to add in our dashboard is this summary table. And so in order to do that, let's first recall the data frame with a few changes that we can make as a base for this last element of the dashboard. So this is the data frame that we are gonna use for this summary table. And now with the next piece of code, we're gonna define a function to filter the data frame based on the selected category. So this is what this function is doing. Then we're gonna create a data frame widget. So we're still gonna use panel, but this time the widget is gonna be a data frame. We're gonna call this summary table. And then we're gonna have basically all the categories, and we're gonna fix the height and width. Then we're gonna also define a callback function that updates the data frame widget when the category filter is changed. And this is because again, we want to use the filter the widget that we defined before to also update this data frame. And then let's just show the summary table, this time without the widget, but just as a demo of what's going to be in the dashboard. And this is the table. And well, now we have the last section, which is to create the final dashboard, probably the most exciting block of code. And so in this case, we're going to use what is called a fast list template from the panel documentation, which is just a template, a predefined template to build a dashboard. So it has already some elements in it that we can use. And so with this, within this template, we're gonna first of all have the title at the top of the dashboard, which is called Personal Finances Summary. Then we're gonna have a sidebar on the left-hand side, And in this sidebar, we're gonna just put a nice quote that I like about money management. Then I'm gonna include a picture that I downloaded on the internet, a PNG file. And then I'm just gonna add a few spaces. And then I'm gonna add the select category filter that is gonna be used to make the dashboard interactive. And then at the center of the dashboard, we have this main part here. And so in here, we have just to add all the elements that we created just now. So we're gonna add, first of all, the top banner that we created with a summary of the income, recurring expenses, monthly expenses, and the savings. And then we're gonna add another row with a bar chart that we created for the last month expenses by category. And then we're gonna use the grid box to create another section in the dashboard that will have side by side the other bar chart that we created for all the expenses by month, and also the last summary table, the last element that we created for the dashboard. And both of these will be updated using the select category filter. And now let's finally run this last piece of code. And so yeah, this is the final dashboard. And so we have the title at the top, we have this sidebar on the left hand side. And the way that we can use this, and obviously you can adjust it depending on how you manage your money. So, each month I'm gonna run this code, I will generate this page, and from here, let's say that I will input, let's say 4,000 as the income. Then recurring expenses is something that, as I told you, I'm tracking separately. So let's say that I can input 1,000 as recurring expenses. So this can be things like the rent or bills, everything that I know I will pay each month, no matter what. And then the non-recurring expenses. So this is something automatically calculated from our bank statement. So this is for the last month. And so here I see the savings that I will have for this last month. Then if we go down, we have this bar chart that summarizes the expenses of the last month divided by category. So it seems that I spend a lot in restaurants, and it seems that I also don't really care about myself. So the self-care bucket is the one with the lowest amount of money that I spent for the last month. And then we can use the select category filter here on the left to filter the elements that we have at the bottom. So let's say that I want to see the amount that I spent for the coffee. So in January, I spent £61 for coffees, and then in February, 54. And then I also see the table here on the right-hand side with all the details of all the expenses that is taken from the bank statement. And so, yeah, this is the final result of the dashboard, and you can definitely take as a foundation and then change it according to how you manage your money or how you want to play around with this project. And there you have it, a little project that will help you develop key skills including data manipulation and analysis, the use of Google APIs, and interactive dashboard creation with Python, which are super valuable skills in the job market, especially in data analysis and data science roles. And if you're looking for other portfolio projects ideas, be sure to check out these other videos that I will leave here in the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And well, enjoy the rest of your day. Ciao for now, and see you in the next one.